We know that the legendary Bigfoot is indigenous to the Pacific Northwest, but it is far from the only enigmatic hominid said to walk the earth. Australia's Yowie is also described as a hairy ape-like creature. A team of researchers there say they recently shot some high-tech footage that proves it really exists. In May 2021, Queensland-based Yowie researcher Dean Harrison and his team are testing out infrared cameras at Springbrook National Park. They picked this spot because they believe they've seen traces of Yowie activity among the brush. And that night, they captured this mysterious footage. The thermal imagery seems to show a solitary figure hiding behind or even hugging a large tree trunk.
Now, this is doing what Yowies do. They hug a tree, pretend they're a part of a tree if there's a human in the area, and they just blend. So you can see him just putting his head in.
Minutes later, the image changes. Now it looks like there's a couple.
Two giant creatures emerge from the foliage, and one is bending down to pick up something.
As it bends over, you can also make out what looks like one of the creature's heads. It looks cone-shaped. The figures are large with wide shoulders and ape-like proportions. Field researcher Cliff Barrickman, who has been to Australia to study the Yowie, says the footage aligns with descriptions from indigenous peoples going back centuries.
All of the Aborigines down there have drawings on the walls of caves depicting these things. They're prevalent in their storytelling traditions as well. But then the settlers came in the late 1700s, and they too started running into Yowies, which is another very strong indicator that they're a real biological animal.
Now, Bigfoot-like creatures are part of folklore the world over. Nepal has the Yeti, Mongolia has the Alma. And one theory is that they all descended from a single Asian ancestor, some of whom made it to Australia, while others crossed the Bering Land Bridge, came to North America, and evolved into Bigfoot. If this video is real, it could help prove that theory, but that's a big if.
There's some sort of subject, creature, person, if you will. It's something that's emitting a heat signature. And as we go through different FLIR filter arrays, this object's movement is consistent. There is something happening in here that's moving around.
Look at the footage with this filter. Now the head comes into better view. It appears to have a pronounced sagittal crest, a ridge of bone along the top of the cranium. It's similar to what's seen in the skulls of the early hominid Australopithecus, which some believe to be the common ancestor of Bigfoot, Yowie, and other similar creatures. But Primo is cautious.
Although we have not found any evidence to support that the recording was fabricated, we have no idea what is being depicted here.
Next, our zoologist Roxy Furman analyzes the anatomy of the figures.
What we can see clearly at one point is that there are two animals pictured. It also looks like it's a bipedal animal, which means it walks on two legs.
That might have you thinking primate, but here's a key fact. There are no known primates native to Australia. In fact, the only bipedal animals are the cassowary and the kangaroo, which look nothing like this. So how do we explain the heat signatures in those head shapes? Furman thinks she may have the answer. People wearing headlamps.
That would explain why the head's a slightly strange shape.
That would mean the people were either misidentified or they're participants in an elaborate hoax, maybe Australia's version of the Patterson-Gimlin film, if that was a hoax too. But anthropologist Kathy Strain says that in this case, size does matter. The research team went back to the spot in daylight and measured the tree, matching the thermal footage as best they could to get a sense of the size of the figures in the infrared video.
Whatever it is more than 8 feet tall. The possibility of them being human is highly unlikely. I came to the conclusion that what this video shows are two real Yowie. I think it is one of the most significant films taken in at least 50 years.
So yes, there's a possibility that this is a hoax. But based on Professor Strain's estimate of the creature's height, we're going to say these are possible Yowies. May 21st, 2022, Amarillo, Texas. It's around 1:25 a.m. and the zoo's security cameras are keeping their sleepless eyes on its animals when they capture this. A strange figure just outside the zoo's perimeter lurks in the darkness. As we push in, the figure appears to be standing on two legs just on the other side of the fence, looking inside. Shocked by the size of the creature and its rather wolf-like head, the Amarillo Zoo has begun asking the general public for help figuring out what this UAO, unidentified Amarillo object, could be. Take another look. This bipedal creature is quite puzzling. The image goes viral with thousands of people viewing it. Now let's take a closer look at this image. A lot of folks have said they can discern fur on this thing's arms and pointed ears on its head. On the other hand, some people say it's standing like a human and it looks like it's wearing pants. And they see this as a jacket. As for me, I have no idea. Field researcher Ken Gerhard cites the figure's resemblance to an infamous creature from folklore.
One of the theories is that it could in fact be a Chupacabra, a famous creature that has been talked about throughout Latin American culture since the 1990s and is a blood-sucking type of creature. The name Chupacabra actually means goat sucker because it's been alleged that these creatures will drink the blood of goats and other small farm animals. I've examined the remains of several creatures that have been called Chupacabras. And all of those animals displayed very dog-like features. Pointy ears, long snouts, strange skin, long fangs, other physical abnormalities.
During a 2-month period in 2010, more than 300 goats were slaughtered in rural Mexico. Ranchers believe these deaths resulted from a Chupacabra stalking their livestock. So could this image be a Chupacabra stalking the zoo? Our experts investigate. Professor of biology Floyd Hayes begins by estimating the size of the creature.
To me, it looks like the fence itself may be 12 feet high. The animal looks like it's maybe 6 feet behind the fence, which would make it smaller. It appears to be about half the height of the fence. It's maybe about 7.5 feet tall.
That's much bigger than the alleged size of a Chupacabra, and there's another issue.
The Chupacabra is allegedly a quadrupedal or four-legged animal, but this appears to be bipedal rather than quadrupedal. Bipedal means it's walking on two legs.
Next, wildlife biologist Stephanie Schuttler examines the creature's hair.
Chupacabras are described as being more hairless with gray and scaly skin. In this image, it seems to be more shaggy. It seems to have long hair, especially on top. So it doesn't fit the description.
And even though sightings of the creature have been reported, Schuttler says the proof has yet to be discovered.
Any evidence of animals that were thought to be chupacabras, it always ended up being a canid species like a coyote, dog, or fox with mange.
Demodectic mange is caused by a parasitic mite that lives in the hair follicles of canines. To rid themselves of the parasites, canines will scratch their fur and skin until it falls off. But the biggest red flag of all, why the zoo only released one image of such a startling discovery?
Camera traps, when they're triggered, they usually take multiple photos. So I would love to see the photos before and after. There's rarely a singular photo of an animal when the cameras are triggered. I suspect this was a publicity stunt by the Amarillo Zoo. If they really wanted to figure out what this animal was, there would definitely be more photos of it.
Now hold on a second. If this is a hoax, then the zoo has been keeping up the deception for months. Our verdict? Unidentified creature. A Seattle-based company specializing in wireless cameras donated 80 color night vision cameras to the Amarillo Zoo after this image went viral. So should this creature reappear, there should be plenty of proof to determine what it is. September 2018, Saskatchewan, Canada. A local fishing guide is going about a normal day in his lodge when he spies something strange out his window. Something dark and hairy is huddled on the ground amongst the trees. At first, it looks like a small bear, and then it stands and nearly triples in height. It's a huge wolf, and we only understand its scale when it lunges at the regular-sized dog who's defensively barking. The animals quarrel until the man goes to intervene. Let's see that again.
This large shape suddenly becomes animated and springs up and charges at the dog. And much to my shock and horror, it appears to be a wolf of mind-boggling proportions. It's truly monstrous.
Field researcher Ken Gerhardt tells us of the giant wolf's prominent stature in folklore.
There have long been legends of monstrous, bloodthirsty wolves. In France, we have the beast of Gévaudan. In Alaska, there's something known as the Amarok, or demon wolf. And nearby in the Nahanni Valley of Canada, we have something known as the Wahila. The Nahanni Valley is also known as the Headless Valley because the decapitated bodies of prospectors and trappers have been found there and have been linked to the legend of this giant wolf-like Wahila. So we have these long enduring traditions of giant wolves, and we have to wonder if there might be a grain of truth to this legend.
Some have speculated that this wolf might be more familiar than we think, a creature not from the realm of legend, but from our own prehistory.
The largest gray wolves, Canis lupus, have been known to achieve weights of about 200 pounds. But if we go back over 10,000 years ago to the Pleistocene epoch, there were these monstrous bone-crushing wolves known as dire wolves, Canis dirus. A relic population of dire wolves may have survived as recently as 4,000 years ago in Arkansas's Ozarks. We could be dealing with a dire wolf genetic code that's been locked into modern wolves and is now resurfacing in this remarkable individual.
An interesting note about that French beast of Gévaudan. Though that monster wolf lived on and kept killing after being driven off by a young boy, that kid was rewarded for his bravery. King Louis XV paid for his education. Now let's get the educated opinion on this specimen. Could there be something off about this wolf's genetics? Some sort of mutation? There is a phenomenon called an atavism, where a creature has traits from its ancestors preserved in its genes. However, it's unlikely in this case, as atavisms aren't likely to manifest in the form of a canine size. An extra toe is more likely. Then what's going on here? Wildlife biologist Stephanie Shuttler isn't crying wolf, she's crying hoax.
To me, it didn't look like the dog was in danger. That was really suspicious. So that's what makes me think that it was a CGI.
When someone suspects a fake, we call in Michael Primo, our forensic video analyst.
It's my conclusion that there is no additional information that was introduced into these recordings that would be similar to something that was CGI'd or manufactured.
With the clip appearing to be legitimate, biologist Floyd Hayes discusses the creature's resemblance to the dire wolf.
The dire wolf is a little bit larger than a wolf with a larger head and smaller feet.
What's more, the dire wolf had shorter, stockier legs to keep them warmer during the cold winter months. The wolf we see here is proportioned much more similarly to our modern-day canine. So with all other possibilities unlikely, Hayes says it's just a gray wolf. But there's a surprise. He did a size calculation and found this specimen to be one of the largest wolves ever documented. Hayes says the dog looks like a type of husky, which tend to grow a little over 2 feet tall and around 60 pounds. And the wolf looks about 1.5 times larger than the dog here. Hayes guesses this wolf is about 3 feet tall and 6.5 feet from end to end. That's longer than most men are tall. And what's more, it's nearly a record. Compared to the largest wolf ever recorded, Hayes thinks this is only half an inch shorter. So this wolf is truly a gargantuan. Incredible. Our verdict, an actual wolf who just happens to be quite large for his species. This is not a supernatural creature, but he is an outlier. How he got that big is still a mystery. But we know he's a loner who probably branched off to form his own pack. Tartu, Estonia, October 2021. Johan Uibapu receives a disturbing phone call from his mother regarding her chicken coop. He offers to take a look, but nothing could prepare him for what he finds.
Oh boy. Their tail is really tangled.
That's an understatement. Let's take another look. What looks like a heap of black rats is actually a heap of black rats with their tails hopelessly entangled together. There are 13 rats in this bundle bound together for life.
One of them, unfortunately, looks like it has passed on to the next world. And maybe that's for the best. I wouldn't want to be tied to a bunch of my brothers and sisters either.
Would you believe that this isn't the first time a knot of rats like this has been discovered? It's even got a name, the Rat King.
The term rat king is thought to originate from German. It's a number of rats whose tails have become entangled so that they are basically like a rodent superorganism. An older, wiser rat would sit atop a pile of younger rats, and they would serve all of his needs. Unfortunately for rat kings, they are considered to be bad omens. It's thought that they warn of the plague. They're also associated with witchcraft.
Because of this, in old Strasbourg, where rat kings were found, they were usually drowned in a well or dunked in boiling water before being brought to the local school teacher to study them. Because of their supernatural associations and the rarity of their occurrences, there's debate as to whether or not rat kings are cruel, man-made hoaxes.
There is a long history of fabricating creatures for profit. Think about P.T. Barnum's Fiji Mermaid, George Hull's Cardiff Giant. Back in the day, people would take lizards and glue bat wings on them and say, here, buy a dragon. Or they'd stick a narwhal horn on a horse and say, this is a unicorn. So a hoax is definitely not outside the realm of possibility.
Knots are complicated. There's a whole area of mathematics called knot theory, dedicated to studying these things in the abstract. And the knots of the rat king tales are complex too. Scientists have attempted to recreate them, and they quickly discovered it was a lot harder than expected. The knots they made looked too neat and intentional, and those rats were dead. Let's turn to our experts to see what they think about this whole thing. First, we turn to biologist Floyd Hayes to find out, is this real? And if so, how the heck does something like this happen?
One possibility is that it was faked and somebody actually stuck the tails together. But it could also be a natural phenomenon, and I think that's most likely in this case. It's been suggested that perhaps they are stuck together from birth, but that seems very unlikely because these are fairly well grown and they would likely starve to death if they were stuck together for a few weeks.
So if they weren't destined at birth to become parts of a rat king, how do they form?
So a rat king occurs when the tails are stuck together. This usually happens in black rats, which have unusually long tails compared to other species of rats. And it happens mostly in cold countries during the winter months. And it is believed that their tails are frozen together overnight when they're huddling together for warmth by water or urine or sperm or food.
However, in a bizarre twist, when we do some research of our own, we find that temperatures in this area of Estonia only had a low of 36 degrees Fahrenheit the night before this rat king was found. Not cold enough to freeze. And what's more, rats, contrary to their reputation, groom themselves nearly as much as cats. The idea that they could get stuck together with dirt and grime seems unlikely. So we turn to wildlife biologist Stephanie Schuttler. She says the rat king legend carries a grain of truth.
Rats can be carriers of diseases and parasites. So the fact that people thought rat kings were bad omens or carriers or signals of plague, it's not that unreasonable of a leap.
It might just be coincidence, but the COVID-19 epidemic was still ravaging Europe when this video was shot. And Schuttler says there's another question gnawing at her. Why do these rats lie down and accept their fates? Why don't they fight back?
When animals are stuck or trying to escape from something, they can do things like chew their own appendage off. Like this has happened in leg traps with animals like coyotes or wolves. Why aren't these rats chewing their own tails off to get away?
Our verdict? It seems like rat kings form naturally. But what we don't know is the why of it all. Why aren't there more rat kings? And why don't these rats make more of an effort to escape? It remains an unexplained mystery.